Zhuang Zi, Book 12, Tianti, or Heaven and Earth. Notwithstanding the greatness of heaven and earth, their transforming power proceeds from one lathe. Notwithstanding the number of the myriad things, the government of them is one and the same. Notwithstanding the multitude of mankind, the Lord of them is their one ruler. The ruler's course should proceed from the qualities of the Tao and be perfected by heaven. Tian. When it is so, it is called mysterious and sublime. The ancients ruled the world by doing nothing, simply by this attribute of heaven. If we look at their words in the light of the Tao, we see that the appellation for the ruler of the world was correctly assigned. If we look in the same light at the distinctions they instituted, we see that the separation of ruler and ministers was right. If we look at the abilities they called forth in the same light, we see that the duties of all the offices were well performed. And if we look generally in the same way at all things, we see that their response to this rule was complete. Therefore, that which pervades the action of heaven and earth is this one attribute. That which operates in all things is this one course. That by which their superiors govern the people is the business of the various departments, and that by which aptitude is given to ability is skill. The skill was manifested in all the departments of business. Those departments were all administered in righteousness. The righteousness was the outflow of the natural virtue. The virtue was manifested according to the Tao, and the Tao was according to the pattern of heaven. Hence it is said that ancients who had the nourishment of the world wished for nothing, and the world had enough. They did nothing, and all things were transformed. Their stillness was abysmal, and the people were all composed. The record says, when the one Tao pervades it, all business is completed. When the mind gets to be free from all aim, even the spirits submit. The Master said, it is the Tao that overspreads and sustains all things. How great it is in its overflowing influence. The superior man ought by all means to remove from his mind all that is contrary to it. Acting without action is what is called heaven-like. Speech coming forth of itself is what is called a mark of true virtue. Loving men and benefiting things are what is called benevolence. Seeing wherein things that are different yet agree is what is called being great. Conduct free from the ambition of being distinguished above others is what is called being generous. The possession in himself of a myriad points of difference is what is called being rich. Therefore, to hold fast the natural attributes is what is called the guiding line of government. The perfecting of those attributes is what is called its establishment. Accordance with the Tao is what is called being complete, and not allowing anything external to affect the will is what is called being perfect. When the superior man understands these 10 things, he keeps all matters, as it were, sheathed in himself, showing the greatness of his mind. And through the outflow of his doings, all things move and come to him. Being such, he lets the gold lie hid in the hill and the pearls in the deep. He considers not property or money to be any gain. He keeps aloof from riches and honors. He rejoices not in long life and grieves not for early death. He does not account prosperity a glory, nor is he ashamed of poverty. He would not grasp the whole world as his own private portion. He would not desire to rule over the whole world as his own private distinction. His distinction is in understanding that all things belong to the one treasury, and that death and life should be viewed in the same way. The Master said, how still and deep is the place where the Tao resides. How limpid is its purity. Metal and stone without it will give forth no sound. They have indeed the power of sound in them, but unless struck, they do not emit it. Who can determine the qualities that are in all things? The man of kingly qualities holds on his way unoccupied and is ashamed to busy himself with the conduct of affairs. He establishes himself in what is the root and source of his capacity, and his wisdom grows to be spirit-like. In this way, his attributes become more and more great. When his mind goes forth, whatever things come in his way, it lays hold of and deals with them. Thus, without the Tao, the bodily form would not be manifested. Is not he who preserves the body and gives the fullest development to the life, who establishes the attributes of the Tao and clearly displays it, possessed of kingly qualities? How majestic is he in his sudden issuings forth, and in his unexpected movements, whose qualities fit him to rule. This we call the man whose qualities fit him to rule. He sees where there is deepest obscurity. He hears where there is no sound. In the midst of the deepest obscurity, he alone sees and can distinguish various objects. In the midst of a soundless abyss, he alone can hear a harmony of notes. Therefore, where one deep is followed by a greater, he can people all with things. Where one mysterious height is followed by another, that is, more so, he can lay hold of the subtlest character of each. In this way, while he is farthest from having anything, he can yet give to things what they seek. While he is always hurrying forth, he yet returns to his resting place. Now large, now small, now long, now short, now distant, now near. Zhuang Zi, enjoying himself on the north of the Red Water, ascended to the height of the Kunlun mountain, and having looked toward the south, was returning home when he lost his dark-colored pearl. He employed wisdom to search for it, but he could not find it. He employed the vehement debater, Chie Cho, to search for it, but he could not find it. He then employed Purposeless, who found it, on which Zhuang Zi said, "How strange that it was Purposeless who was able to find it." Teacher of Yao was Shu Yu of Shu Yu, Nie Chui of Nie Chui, Wang Yi of Wang Yi, Pei Yi. Yao asked Shu Yu, saying, "Is Nie Chui fit to be the correlate of heaven? If you think he is, I will avail myself of the services of Wang Yi to compel him to take my place." Shu Yu replied, "Such a measure would be hazardous and full of peril to the kingdom. The character of Nie Chui is this: he is acute, perspicacious, shrewd, and knowing, ready in reply, sharp in retort, and hasty. His natural endowments surpass those of other men, but by his human qualities he seeks to obtain the heavenly gift. He exercises his discrimination in suppressing his errors, but he does not know what is the source from which his errors arise. Make him the correlate of heaven, he would employ the human qualities so that no regard would be paid to the heavenly gift. Moreover, he would assign different functions to the different parts of one unity. Moreover, honor would be given to knowledge. He would have his plans take effect with the speed of fire. Moreover, he would be the slave of everything he initiated. Moreover, he would be embarrassed by things. Moreover, he would be looking all around for the response of things to his measures. Moreover, he would be responding to the opinion of the multitude as to what was right. Moreover, he would be changing as things changed, and would not begin to have any principle of constancy. How can such a man be fit to be the correlate of heaven? Nevertheless, as there are the smaller branches of a family and the common ancestor of all its branches, he might be the father of a branch, but not the father of the fathers of all the branches. Such government as he would conduct would lead to disorder. It would be calamity in one in the position of a minister, and ruin if he were in the position of the sovereign. Yao was looking about him at Hua, the border warden of which said, "Ha, the sage! Let me ask blessings on the sage. May he live long." Yao said, "Hush." But the other went on, "May the sage become rich." Yao again said, "Hush." But the warden continued, "May the sage have many sons." When Yao repeated his hush, the warden said, "Long life, riches, and many sons are what men wish for. How is it that you alone do not wish for them?" Yao replied, "Many sons bring many fears, riches bring many troubles, and long life gives rise to many obliques. These three things do not help to nourish virtue, therefore I wish to decline them." The warden rejoined, "At first I considered you to be a sage, now I see in you only a superior man. Heaven, in producing the myriads of the people, is sure to have appointed for them their several offices. If you had many sons, and gave them all their offices, what would you have to fear? If you had riches, and made other men share them with you, what trouble would you have? The sage finds his dwelling like the quail without any choice of its own, and is fed like the fledgling. He is like the bird that passes on through the air and leaves no trace of its flight. When good order prevails in the world, he shares in the general prosperity. When there is no such order, he cultivates his virtue and seeks to be unoccupied. After 1,000 years, tired of the world, he leaves it and ascends among the mortals. He mounts on the white clouds and arrives at the place of God. The three forms of evil do not reach him. His person is always free from misfortune. What obliquely has he to incur?" With this, the border warden left him. Yao followed him, saying, "I beg to ask." But the other said, "Begone!" When Yao was ruling the world, Po Chung Zi was appointed by him prince of one of the states. From Yao the throne passed to Shun, and from Shun again to Yu, and then Po Chung to Cao resigned his principality and began to cultivate the ground. Yu went to see him, and found him plowing in the open country. Hurrying to him, and bowing low in acknowledgment of his superiority, Yu then stood up and asked him, saying, Formerly, when Yao was ruling the world, you, sir, were appointed prince of a state. He gave his sovereignty to Shun, and Shun gave his to me. Then you, sir, resign your dignity and are now plowing here. I venture to ask the reason of your conduct." Zhu Kao said, "When Yao ruled the world, the people stimulated one another to what was right without his offering them rewards, and stood in awe of doing wrong without his threatening them with punishments. Now you employ both rewards and punishments, and the people, notwithstanding, are not good. Their virtue will from this time decay. Punishments will from this time prevail. The disorder of future ages will from this time begin. Why do you, my master, not go away and not interrupt my work?" With this he resumed his plowing with his head bent down, and did not again look round. In the grand beginning of all things, there was nothing in all the vacancy of space that could be named. It was in this state that there arose the first existence. But still without bodily shape. From this, things could then be produced, receiving what we call their proper character. That which had no bodily shape was divided, and then, without intermission, there was what we call the process of conferring. The two processes continuing in operation, things were produced. As things were completed, there were produced the distinguishing lines that we call the bodily shape. That shape was the body, preserving in it the spirit, and each had its peculiar manifestation that we call its nature. When the nature has been cultivated, it returns to its proper character. When that has been fully reached, there is the same condition as at the beginning. That sameness is pure vacancy, and the vacancy is great. It is like the closing of the beak and silencing the singing of a bird. That closing and silencing are like the union of heaven and earth at the beginning. The union, effected as it is, might seem to indicate stupidity or darkness, but it is what we call the mysterious quality, existing at the beginning. It is the same as the grand submission to the natural course. Confucius asked Lao Tzu, saying, "Some men regulate the Tao as by a law, that they have only to follow. A thing, they say, is admissible or it is inadmissible. It is so or it is not so. They are like the sophists who say that they can distinguish what is hard and what is white as clearly as if the objects were houses suspended in the sky. Can such men be said to be sages?" The reply was, "They are like the busy underlings of a court who toil their bodies and distress their minds with their various artifices, dogs employed to their sorrow to catch the yak, or monkeys brought from their forests for their trickiness. Chill, I tell you this, it is what you cannot hear and what you cannot speak of those who have their heads and feet and yet have neither minds nor ears. There are multitudes, while of those who have their bodies and at the same time preserve that which has no bodily form or shape, there are really more. It is not in their movements or stoppages, their dying or living, their falling and rising again, that this is to be found. The regulation of the course lies in their dealing with the human element in them, when they have forgotten external things and have also forgotten the heavenly element in them. They may be named men who have forgotten themselves. The man who has forgotten himself is he of whom it is said that he has become identified with heaven." At an interview with Zhiche, Jiang Lumian said to him, "Our ruler of Lu asked to receive my instructions. I declined, on the ground that I had not received any message for him. Afterward, however, I told him my thoughts. I do not know whether what I said was right or not, and I begged to repeat it to you. I said to him, 'You must strive to be courteous and to exercise self-restraint. You must distinguish the public-spirited and loyal and repress the cringing and selfish. Who among the people will in that case dare not to be in harmony with you?'" Shicha laughed quietly and said, "Your words, my master, as a description of the right course for a Tsi or king, were like the threatening movement of its arms by a mantis that would thereby stop a carriage, inadequate to accomplish your object. And moreover, if he guided himself by your direction, it would be as if he were to increase the dangerous height of his towers and add to his valuables collected in them. The multitudes of the people would leave their old ways and bend their steps in the same direction." Jiang Lumian was awestruck and said in his fright, "I am startled by your words, master. Nevertheless, I should like to hear you describe the influence a ruler should exert." The other said, "If a great sage ruled the kingdom, he would stimulate the minds of the people and cause them to carry out his instructions fully and change their manners. He would take their minds which had become evil and violent and extinguish them, carrying them all forward to act in accordance with the good will belonging to them as individuals, as if they did it of themselves from their nature, while they knew not what made them do so. would such a one be willing to look up to Yao and Shun in their instruction of the people as his elder brothers, he would treat them as his juniors, belonging himself to the period of the original plastic ether. His wish would be that all should agree with the virtue of that early period and quietly rest in it. Zhuang had been rambling in the south in Chu and was returning to Xin. As he passed a place on the north of the Han, he saw an old man who was going to work on his vegetable garden. He had dug his channels, gone to the well, and was bringing in his arms a jar of water to pour into them. Toiling away, he expended a great deal of strength, but the result was very small. Zikong said to him, "There is a contrivance here by means of which 100 plots of ground may be irrigated in one day. With a very little strength, the result accomplished is great. Would you, master, not like to try it?" The gardener looked up at him and said, "How does it work?" The Kong said, "It is a lever made of wood, heavy behind and light in front. It raises the water as quickly as you could with your hand, or as it bubbles over from a boiler. Its name is a shut-off." The gardener put on an angry look, laughed, and said, "I have heard from my teacher that where there are ingenious contrivances, there are sure to be subtle doings, and that where there are subtle doings, there is sure to be a scheming mind. But when there is a scheming mind in the breast, its pure simplicity is impaired. When this pure simplicity is impaired, the spirit becomes unsettled. The unsettled spirit is not the proper residence of the Tao. It is not that I do not know the contrivance you mention, but I should be ashamed to use it." At these words, Zikong looked blank and ashamed. He hung his head and made no reply. After an interval, the gardener said to him, "Who are you, sir?" "The disciple of Confucius," was the reply. The other continued, "Are you not the scholar whose great learning makes you comparable to a sage, who makes it your boast that you surpass all others, who sings melancholy songs all by yourself, thus purchasing a famous reputation throughout the kingdom? If you would only forget the energy of your spirit and neglect the care of your body, you might approximate to the Tao. But while you cannot regulate yourself, what leisure have you to be regulating the world? Go on your way, sir, and do not interrupt my work." Zikong shrank back, abashed and turned pale. He was perturbed and lost his self-possession, nor did he recover it till he had walked a distance of 30 li. His disciples then said, "Who was that man? Why, master, when you saw him, did you change your bearing and become pale, so that you have been all day without returning to yourself?" He replied to them, "Formerly I thought that there was but one man in the world, and did not know that there was this man. I have heard the master say that to seek for the means of conducting his undertakings, so that his success in carrying them out may be complete, and how by the employment of a little strength great results may be attained, is the way of the sage. Now I perceive that it is not so at all. They who hold fast and cleave to the Tao are complete in the qualities belonging to it. Complete in those qualities, they are complete in their bodies. Complete in their bodies, they are complete in their spirits. To be complete in spirit is the way of the sage. Such men live in the world in closest union with the people, going along with them, but they do not know where they are going. Vast and complete is their simplicity. Success, gain, ingenious contrivances, and artful cleverness indicate in their opinion of forgetfulness of the proper mind of man. These men will not go where their mind does not carry them, and will do nothing of which their mind does not approve. Though all the world should praise them, they would only get what they think should be loftily disregarded. Though all the world should blame them, they would but lose what they think fortuitous and not to be received. The world's blame and praise can do neither benefit nor injury. Such men may be described as possessing all the attributes of the Tao, while I can only be called one of those who are like the waves carried about by the wind. When he returned to Lu, Zhuang reported the interview and conversation to Confucius, who said, "The man makes a pretense of cultivating the arts of the embryonic age. He knows the first thing, but not the sequel to it. He regulates what is internal in himself, but not what is external. If he had intelligence enough to be entirely unsophisticated, and by doing nothing seek to return to normal simplicity, embodying the instincts of his nature and keeping his spirit, as it were, in his arms, so enjoying himself in the common ways, you might then indeed be afraid of him. But what should you and I find in the arts of the embryonic time worth our knowing?" Shenmong, on his way to the ocean, met with Yuan Feng, who asked him where he was going. "I am going," he replied, "to the ocean." The other again asked, "What for?" Shenmong said, "Such is the nature of the ocean that the waters which flow into it can never fill it, nor those which flow from it exhaust it. I will enjoy myself rambling by it." Yuan Feng replied, "Have you no thoughts about mankind? I should like to hear from you about sagely government." Shenmong said, "Under the government of sages, all offices are distributed according to the fitness of their nature. All appointments are made according to the ability of the men. Whatever is done is after a complete survey of all circumstances. Actions and words proceed from the inner impulse, and the whole world is transformed. Wherever their hands are pointed and their looks directed, from all quarters the people are sure to do what they desire. This is what is called government by sages." "I should like to hear about the government of the kindly, virtuous men," continued Yuan Feng. The reply was, "Under the government of the virtuous, when quietly occupying their place, they have no thought. When they act, they have no anxiety. They do not keep stored in their minds what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. They share their benefits among all within the four seas, and this produces what is called the state of satisfaction. They dispense their gifts to all, and this produces what is called the state of rest. People grieve on the death of the kindly, virtuous men, like babies who have lost their mothers, and are perplexed like travelers who have lost their way. They have a superabundance of wealth in all necessaries, and they know not whence it comes. They have a sufficiency of food and drink, and they know not from whom they get it. Such are appearances under the government of the kindly and virtuous." "I should like to hear about the government of the spirit-like men," continued Yuan Feng once more. The reply was, "Men of the highest spirit-like qualities mount up on the light. The limitations of the body vanish. This we call being bright and ethereal. They carry out to the utmost the powers with which they are endowed, and have not a single attribute unused. Their joy is that of heaven and earth. All embarrassments of affairs melt away and disappear. All things return to their proper nature. This is what is called the state of chaotic obscurity, but no human element had yet come in to mar the development of the Tao." Men Hua Kui and Shi Chang Manchu have been looking at the army of King Wu when the latter said, "It is because he was not born in the time of the Lord of Yu that he is involved in this trouble of war. Min Wu Kuei replied, "Was it when the kingdom was in good order that the Lord of Yu governed it, or was it after it had become disordered?" The other said, "That the kingdom should be in a condition of good order is what all desire, and in that case what necessity would there be to say anything about the Lord of Yu? He had medicine for sores, false hair for the bald, healing for those who were ill. He was like the filial son carrying in the medicine to cure his kind father, with every sign of distress in his countenance. The sage would be ashamed of such a thing." In the age of perfect virtue they attached no value to wisdom, nor employed men of ability. Superiors were but as the higher branches of a tree, and the people were like the deer of the wild. They were upright and correct without knowing that to be so was righteousness. They loved one another without knowing that to do so was benevolence. They were honest and leal-hearted without knowing that it was lofty. They fulfilled their engagements without knowing that to do so was good faith. In their simple movements they employed the services of one another without thinking that they were conferring or receiving any gift. Therefore their actions left no trace, and there was no record of their affairs. The filial son who does not flatter his father and the loyal minister who does not fawn on his ruler are the highest examples of a minister and a son. When a son assents to all that his father says and approves of all that his father does, common opinion pronounces him an unworthy son. When a minister assents to all that his ruler says and approves of all that his ruler does, common opinion pronounces him an unworthy minister. Nor does anyone reflect that this view is necessarily correct. But when common opinion itself affirms anything and men therefore assent to it, or counts anything good and men approve of it, then it is not said that they are mere consenters and flatterers. Is common opinion then more authoritative than a father, or more to be honored than a ruler? Tell a man that he is merely following the opinions of another, or that he is a flatterer, and at once he flushes with anger, and yet all his life he is merely following others and flattering them. His illustrations are made to agree with theirs, his phrases are glossed to win the approbation of the multitudes. From first to last, from beginning to end, he finds no fault with their views. He will let his robes hang down, display the colors on them, arrange his movements and bearing so as to win the favor of his age, and yet not call himself a flatterer. He is but a follower of those others, approving and disapproving as they do, and yet he will not say that he is one of them. This is the height of stupidity. He who knows his stupidity is not very stupid. He who knows that he is under a delusion is not greatly deluded. He who is greatly deluded will never shake the delusion off. He who is very stupid will never become intelligent. If 3 men are walking together and only one of them is under a delusion as to their way, they may yet reach their goal, but if 2 of them are under the delusion, they will not do so, the deluded being the majority. At the present time, when the whole world is under delusion, though I pray men to go in the right direction, I cannot make them do so. Is it not a side case? Grand music does not penetrate the ears of villagers, but if they hear the breaking of the willow or the bright flowers, they will roar with laughter. So it is that lofty words do not remain in the minds of the multitude, and perfect words are not heard. The vulgar words predominate. By 2 earthenware instruments, the music of a bell will be confused, and the pleasure that it would afford cannot be obtained. At the present time, the whole world is under a delusion. Though I wish to go in a certain direction, how can I? Knowing that I cannot do so, if I were to try to force my way, that would be another delusion. Therefore my best course is to let my purpose go and no more pursue it. If I do not pursue it, whom shall I have to share in my sorrow? If an ugly man has a son born to him at midnight, he hastens with the light to look at it very eagerly. He does so, only afraid that it may be like himself. From a tree 100 years old, a portion is cut and fashioned into a sacrificial vase, with the bull figured on it, which is ornamented further with green and yellow, white, while the rest of that portion is cut away and thrown into a ditch. If now we compare the sacrificial vase with what was thrown into the ditch, there will be a difference between them as respects their beauty and ugliness, but they both agree in having lost the proper nature of the wood. So in respect of their practice of righteousness, there is a difference between the robber Shi on the one hand and Zhuang Zi or Shi Yu on the other, but they all agree in having lost the proper qualities of their nature. There are 5 things which produce in men the loss of their proper nature. The first is their fondness for the 5 colors that disorder the eye and take from it its proper clearness of vision. The second is their fondness for the 5 notes of music that disorder the ear and take from it its proper power of hearing. The third is their fondness for the 5 odors that penetrate the nostrils and produce a feeling of distress all over the forehead. Fourth is their fondness for the 5 flavors that deaden the mouth and pervert its sense of taste. The fifth is their preferences and dislikes that unsettle the mind and cause the nature to go flying about. These 5 things are all injurious to the life, and now Yang, Chu, and Mo Zi begin to stretch forward from their different standpoints, each thinking that he has hit on the proper course for men. But the courses they have hit on are not what I call the proper course. What they have hit on only leads to distress. Can they have hit on what is the right thing? If they have, we may say that the dove in a cage has found the right thing for it. Moreover, these preferences and dislikes, that fondness for music and colors, serve but to pile up fuel in their breasts, while their caps of leather, the bonnet with kingfisher's plumes, the memorandum tablets which they carry, and their long girdles serve but as restraints on their persons. Thus inwardly stuffed full as a whole for fuel, and outwardly fast bound with cords, they look quietly round from out of their bondage and think they have got all they could desire. They are no better than criminals whose arms are tied together and their fingers subjected to the screw, or than tigers and leopards in sacks or cages, and yet thinking that they have got all they could wish.